When was the last time you woke up remembering your dreams? For most of us, the night passes in darkness with only fragments of dreams remaining in the morning light. We close our eyes, surrender to unconsciousness, and wake up hours later with little memory of what transpired in between. But what if I told you there exists a different relationship with sleep altogether? One where the boundary between waking and dreaming becomes permeable, where consciousness continues even as your body rests, where dreams become not just random neural firings, but meaningful messages from a deeper reality. Today, we're exploring the extraordinary case of Chris Langan, often referred to as the smartest man in America with an IQ reportedly around 200, and his remarkable relationship with sleep and dreaming. His experiences challenge our fundamental understanding of consciousness and raise profound questions about human potential. But before we dive into Langan's story, let me ask you, have you ever had a dream that later came true? Or felt that peculiar sense of knowing something without understanding how you knew it? These experiences, often dismissed as coincidences or forgotten entirely, might actually be glimpses into capabilities we all possess but rarely develop. By the end of this journey, you may never look at sleep the same way again. And perhaps more importantly, you might discover that the doorway to extraordinary consciousness isn't locked after all. It's simply waiting for you to push it open. Most of us have a straightforward relationship with sleep. We lie down, close our eyes, fall unconscious, and then wake up with little to no memory of what happened in between. Sleep, for the majority, represents a daily death and rebirth of consciousness, a necessary biological function, but one that creates a gap in our awareness. But for Chris Langan, sleep represents something entirely different. In his own words, most people, they go to sleep, and they wake up not being able to remember what happened. Okay, I remember everything. When I dream, I'm usually conscious of the dream on some level. I see what's happening. This might sound like what many know as lucid dreaming, the ability to become aware that you're dreaming while still in the dream state. But Langan's experience goes beyond that. People talk about lucid dreaming. I don't necessarily get into the dream and try to change it. Instead, I just watch it. What happens? Something is trying to communicate with me about something that's going to happen, already did happen, some situation that exists. And so I'm going to pay attention to that communication, and I'm going to try to decode this when I wake up. Let's pause here and consider what Langan is describing. Rather than viewing dreams as random neural firings or the brain processing daily events, the conventional scientific perspective, he sees dreams as a form of communication. A language through which meaningful information is transferred. When we dream, that's a language, Langan explains. All of these things like that gorilla in your dream, those symbols, they're the symbols of a language. So what happens is when you have a dream, it is actually speaking a certain language to you. What you've got to do then is try to interpret the dream, which means finding out what that language is trying to tell you. Think about that for a moment. What if your dreams aren't just meaningless surrealism, but messages encoded in symbolic form? What might they be trying to tell you? According to Langan, this isn't just idle speculation, it's a practical skill that can be developed. There was a message here. How am I going to decode that message? So you work with the symbols you've got, and you can usually figure it out. I mean, if you actually put things, how does this relate to that? How does that relate to this? You can actually put those things together and come up with a reasonable interpretation of what the message was. This perspective isn't unique to Langan. Throughout human history, cultures across the world have viewed dreams as meaningful communications, from ancient Egyptian dream temples to indigenous dream interpretation traditions. Modern psychology, beginning with Freud and Jung, also recognized the symbolic nature of dreams, though often attributing the source of these symbols to the unconscious mind rather than external realities. Stephen Greer, known for his work on consciousness studies, shares a similar view to Langan's. He points to a phenomenon many of us have experienced, precognitive dreams, where we dream of events that later come to pass. Please pay attention. How is it that during the dream time, you have a crystal clear, full color dream, and whatever that is in that dream happens the next day or next week or the next month or 10 years later? How does that happen? Think about it. This is indeed a profound question. How can we dream of events before they occur? The conventional explanation would suggest coincidence or selective memory. We only remember the dreams that happen to match future events and forget the countless others that don't. But what if there's more to it? What if consciousness isn't bound by the same temporal constraints as our physical bodies? What if during sleep our awareness can access information across time and space? A thing that is experienced by almost every human at some point in their life. Greer continues, that's a sort of a signpost that says you're not only what you think you are. This brings us to a fundamental question about the nature of consciousness itself. The conventional scientific view treats consciousness as an emergent property of brain activity, a product of neurons firing in specific patterns. In this model, consciousness is contained within the brain and ceases during deep sleep. But an alternative perspective suggests consciousness may be more fundamental, possibly even primary to physical reality rather than derived from it. In this view, our brains might function less like generators of consciousness and more like receivers, tuning into a field of consciousness that exists beyond our individual minds. If this alternative view holds any truth, then sleep might not represent the cessation of consciousness, but a shift in its focus, away from physical sensory input and toward other dimensions of experience. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not asking you to accept this view uncritically. What I'm suggesting is that we consider the possibility that our conventional understanding of consciousness might be incomplete, that there might be more to human experience than our current scientific paradigms can fully explain. And Chris Langan's extraordinary relationship with sleep and dreaming gives us reason to consider these possibilities. After all, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but sometimes extraordinary humans provide us with glimpses into what might be possible. Let's return to Langan's experience. What makes his relationship with dreams particularly interesting is his methodical approach to dream interpretation. He doesn't simply accept dreams as meaningful. He actively works to decode them, treating the symbols in his dreams as elements of a language to be understood. This suggests that whatever capabilities Langan possesses might not be solely the result of extraordinary intelligence, but also of deliberate practice and attention. And if that's the case, might it be possible for others, for you and me, to develop similar capabilities? Stephen Greer certainly thinks so. He suggests these abilities are not mystical gifts reserved for special individuals, but natural human capacities that have been systematically downplayed by cultural and scientific authorities. This is something that has been unfortunately relegated to mysticism, Greer says, and a lot of thinking is that, well, you've got to be somebody living in a cave 50 years by yourself to experience this. This is absolutely a harmful myth that I think ecclesiastical and spiritual leaders, and unfortunately a lot of my scientific brethren, have propagated. That is a damnable lie. You do not have to be in some kind of esoteric aesthetic setting to have that experience or to develop them. This brings us to a provocative question. If these capabilities are natural to human beings, why aren't they more widely recognized and developed? Greer offers a controversial perspective. The reason that the deeper elements of the intelligence community don't want the public to know is that, first of all, it is extremely efficient spycraft, which they don't want others to have. Secondly, they know that if people understood the power of consciousness, they would be able to completely change the direction of the planet. Now, whether or not one accepts this particular claim, it raises important questions about power, knowledge, and human potential. Throughout history, various forms of power have often depended on limiting people's understanding of their own capabilities. When individuals believe themselves to be limited, those limitations become self-fulfilling prophecies. As Greer puts it, you're telling yourself that lie over and over again, and that becomes its own destiny. Because if you have a different understanding of who and what you are, that is, you, a conscious being capable of connecting to the field of consciousness that's beyond space and time. The implication is clear. Our beliefs about what's possible may be creating artificial boundaries to our experience. By believing consciousness is confined to our waking hours and our physical brains, we may be closing ourselves off to wider dimensions of awareness. But what would it mean to open ourselves to these possibilities? What practical steps might one take to develop greater conscious awareness during sleep? Based on the experiences described by both Langan and Greer, we can identify several practices that might help develop greater consciousness during sleep and dreaming. First, intention. Before sleep, set a clear intention to remain aware during your dreams. As Greer suggests, you went to bed, you're asleep, but as you're going to sleep, get a journal, keep something by your bedside, and begin to affirm to yourself that you can have lucid dreaming, be awake within the dream. Second, attention. Pay close attention to your dreams. Instead of dismissing them upon waking, take time to recall and record them. Look for patterns, recurring symbols, and meaningful connections. Third, interpretation. Like Langan, work with the symbols in your dreams. Ask yourself, how does this relate to that? What might this represent? Practice translating the language of your dreams into conscious understanding. Fourth, meditation. Developing awareness during wakefulness seems to enhance awareness during sleep. As Greer explains, if you're in a very deep, relaxed state, or even taking a nap, but you just gently intend as you're going in and out of the dream state or sleep state, or in and out of the quiet meditative state to know something, it's an intending, and then just relax and let it flow into you and get yourself out of the way. Fifth, practice. Like any skill, developing conscious awareness during sleep requires consistent practice. As Greer emphasizes, practice the remote viewing every day, every minute of every day. Be in a mindful state. Develop at least 2 to 3 times a day this practice of deep, quiet meditation, remote viewing practice, and you'll be stunned at how quickly you advance. Now, let's consider what might be happening when someone like Chris Langan maintains awareness during sleep. From a neurological perspective, normal sleep involves several stages, including rapid eye movement, REM sleep, when most dreaming occurs, and deep non-REM sleep, when consciousness typically fades entirely. During REM sleep, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logical thinking and self-awareness, becomes less active, which is why dreams often lack the coherence and self-reflection of waking consciousness. What Langan seems to be describing might involve maintaining some prefrontal cortex activity during REM sleep, allowing for self-awareness without disrupting the dream imagery. But the more provocative possibility is that consciousness isn't solely generated by brain activity, that awareness might continue through channels not yet fully understood by neuroscience. If consciousness can exist independently of physical brain processes, even to some degree, then awareness during sleep becomes not just possible, but expected under the right conditions. There's a fascinating intersection here with findings from research into near-death experiences, where individuals report conscious awareness even when brain activity has been severely compromised. Similarly, some meditation practitioners report maintaining awareness during deep sleep, a state called yoga nidra, or sleep of the yogis in certain traditions. These phenomena suggest there might be more to consciousness than our current scientific understanding encompasses. And if that's the case, Chris Langan's experiences might represent not an anomaly, but a glimpse into human potential that lies dormant in most of us. Let's delve deeper into what Langan and others might be experiencing during conscious sleep by exploring the concept of non-locality in consciousness. Non-locality, a term borrowed from quantum physics, refers to the ability of particles to instantaneously influence each other regardless of distance. Applied to consciousness, it suggests awareness might transcend the normal boundaries of space and time. As Greer puts it, you're actually connected in consciousness to every point in space and every point in time, and that includes right now, but going back, but going also forward, which is remote viewing into the future. If consciousness possesses any degree of non-locality, then phenomena like precognitive dreams become theoretically possible. Your awareness, unbounded by physical limitations during sleep, might access information across time, explaining how you could dream of events before they occur in your waking experience. This brings us to the practice of remote viewing, the ability to perceive distant or hidden targets without using the physical senses. While controversial in mainstream science, remote viewing was studied extensively by intelligence agencies, notably in the CIA's Stargate project, with results that some researchers found statistically significant. Greer suggests remote viewing isn't a specialized skill, but a natural human capacity. You can see any place, you can see any point in time. You need to understand that this is your innate capability as a higher intelligent life form. The connection to sleep is clear. During sleep, when sensory input is minimized and the analytical mind quiets, subtle perceptions might become more accessible. The boundaries between here and there, now and then, might become more permeable. How might one develop these capacities? Greer offers a practical approach. Step 1, if you're going to not just do it on the fly instantly, you go into this quiet state of meditation and forget about targeting what you're remote viewing. Just stick with the process of experiencing the awake mind and do the meditation technique using either the breathing technique or the mantra or both, or whatever fires your rocket. And when you're in a deep, quiet state, instead of guessing what is in the box, just let your mind rest on it and ask to know what it is. You might see it, you might get the word for it, you may get an aspect of it. The key thing is to not intellectualize it or start just guessing like some kind of parlor trick or kindergarten game. This approach emphasizes direct perception over analytical thinking, allowing information to arise naturally rather than trying to figure it out intellectually. It's a fundamentally different way of knowing than we typically rely on in daily life. The challenge, according to Greer, is distinguishing between genuine perception and mental fabrication. What the mind does, here's a trick, and this is the real art and science of this. When you begin to sense something, you will begin to get something that is an accurate, objectively true, remote view point. And then the mind will start doing the monkey mind thing and leapfrog ahead of the process of just sensing and knowing what it is and filling in the blanks from your memory store. Learning to distinguish between these two, between direct perception and mental fabrication, requires practice. The more you practice it, the more you're going to realize when you're doing that and when you're not. And I will say this, if you do this often enough, this technique I just described, you'll begin to know what it feels like in your heart, in your gut, when it's an accurate perception, and you'll know what it feels like when it was just something that your mind began to confabulate and make up. Let's return to Langan's experience with dream consciousness. What might differentiate his relationship with sleep from most people's experience? Beyond his extraordinary intelligence, Langan seems to possess exceptional metacognitive awareness of his own cognitive processes. This heightened metacognition might allow him to maintain the observing part of consciousness even as the dream experience unfolds. Rather than becoming fully immersed in the dream narrative, losing the distinction between dreamer and dream, he maintains a witnessing awareness that observes without interfering. This approach bears similarities to certain meditation practices, particularly those in contemplative traditions that cultivate witness consciousness, the ability to observe one's experiences without becoming identified with them. It suggests that the skills developed in meditation might translate to sleep states and vice versa. There's a scientific basis for this connection. Research has shown that long-term meditation practitioners often experience changes in their sleep architecture, including increased gamma wave activity during deep sleep, something normally only seen during waking consciousness. Some studies suggest experienced meditators may maintain awareness during phases of sleep, where consciousness typically fades completely. This raises a fascinating possibility. What if the consciousness Langan maintains during sleep isn't exceptional, but represents a human capacity we all possess but rarely develop? What if his 200 IQ hasn't given him a unique ability, but has simply allowed him to recognize and cultivate something inherent to human consciousness? This perspective aligns with wisdom from contemplative traditions worldwide, which have long maintained that ongoing consciousness, even during sleep, is our natural state, but one obscured by mental conditioning and lack of training. In the Tibetan tradition of dream yoga, practitioners develop the ability to maintain awareness during sleep through specific techniques practiced during waking hours. Similarly, in the Indian tradition of Yoga Nidra, practitioners learn to navigate the hypnagogic state between wakefulness and sleep, maintaining consciousness while the body enters deep relaxation. These traditions suggest that sleep, rather than representing the loss of consciousness, might offer a unique opportunity to experience consciousness freed from its usual entanglement with sensory input and conceptual thinking. Now, you might be wondering, this is all very interesting, but is it real? Or are we dealing with subjective experiences that can't be verified? It's a valid question. After all, the scientific method depends on objective measurement and verification. How do we measure someone's awareness during sleep? How do we verify claims about precognitive dreams or remote viewing? Research in these areas faces significant challenges. Sleep consciousness is inherently private, accessible only to the experiencer. Dreams can't be directly observed by others. And phenomena like precognition and remote viewing, if real, operate outside our conventional understanding of physics. But these challenges don't mean these experiences should be dismissed. Throughout history, subjective reports have often preceded scientific understanding. People experienced the effects of gravity long before Newton formulated its laws. Consciousness itself, the very foundation of all human experience, remains incompletely understood by science. Perhaps the most reasonable approach is one of open-minded skepticism, neither dismissing extraordinary claims about consciousness nor accepting them uncritically, but exploring them with both rigor and openness. And for the individual seeking to explore consciousness during sleep, the proof ultimately comes through direct experience. As Greer puts it, you'll begin to know what it feels like in your heart, in your gut, when it's an accurate perception. And this points to a form of knowing that's experiential rather than intellectual, something that must be discovered through practice rather than learned through instruction. It suggests that the true test of these ideas isn't found in debate, but in exploration. So where does this leave us? What are we to make of Langan's claim to remember everything during sleep, to witness his dreams consciously, to decode them as meaningful communications? At minimum, his experience invites us to question our assumptions about consciousness and its boundaries. It challenges the notion that awareness necessarily ceases during sleep. It suggests dreams might carry more meaning than random neural activity. And it raises the possibility that the ordinary human mind might be capable of extraordinary perception under the right conditions. More radically, if Langan's experience reflects even partially what's possible for human consciousness, it suggests we might be living far beneath our potential, operating with a limited understanding of our own minds and their capabilities. What might be possible if we approached sleep not as unconsciousness, but as a different state of consciousness? What might we discover if we paid closer attention to our dreams, working with their symbols as Langan does? What might we learn if we practiced maintaining awareness through the transition from wakefulness to sleep? These questions aren't merely philosophical. They point toward practical exploration, experiments in consciousness that each of us can conduct in the laboratory of our own experience, and the implications extend beyond personal curiosity. If consciousness can operate non-locally, accessing information across space and time, it suggests a fundamental connectedness underlying apparent separation. It points toward a view of reality where consciousness isn't confined to individual brains but participates in a larger field of awareness. Such a perspective, if valid, would transform our understanding of human potential and our relationship to the world. It would suggest that the boundaries we perceive between self and other, between now and then, between here and elsewhere, might be more permeable than we realize. Regardless of whether one accepts the more radical interpretations of conscious sleep and dream communication, the practices associated with developing these capacities offer tangible benefits. Increased awareness during waking hours, greater mindfulness of thought patterns, enhanced creativity through access to deeper levels of mind, improved memory through attention to dreams. These outcomes don't require accepting any particular theory of consciousness. They emerge naturally from the practices themselves. As we conclude this exploration of conscious sleep through the lens of Chris Langan's remarkable experience, I invite you to consider your own relationship with sleep and dreaming. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, what if you approached it not as a descent into unconsciousness, but as a transition into a different mode of awareness? What if you set the intention to remain conscious as your body relaxes into sleep? What if you paid closer attention to your dreams, working with their symbols as elements of a meaningful language? These simple shifts in perspective and attention might open doors to dimensions of experience typically overlooked in our busy lives. They might reveal capabilities of mind that lie dormant simply because we haven't thought to develop them. As Greer suggests, all I'm going to do is help you remember who you really are and give you some techniques that facilitate the sharpening of that ability. You can begin to practice that on a nightly basis, and as you do it, you will be stunned at how accurate you will become in getting that information. Whether Langan's experience represents a unique gift of extraordinary intelligence or a glimpse into capacities we all share, his story invites us to question our assumptions about consciousness and its limitations. It challenges us to explore the frontiers of awareness through direct experience rather than accepting conventional boundaries. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, remember Langan's words. When I dream, I'm conscious of the dream on some level. I see what's happening. With that awareness in mind, perhaps you'll begin to see what's happening in your own dreams and discover that consciousness continues even as the body rests. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of conscious sleep and the extraordinary mind of Chris Langan. If you found value in this journey, please consider subscribing to our channel for more explorations of human potential and the nature of consciousness. Until next time, may your sleep be not just restful, but revealing, and may your dreams speak to you in a language you're learning to understand.